Have you ever sat alone in your room at night, scrolling through your phone, watching everyone else's seemingly perfect lives unfold through carefully curated photos and status updates? Your heart aches as you see couples sharing intimate moments, friends gathering for spontaneous adventures, and families creating precious memories together. And there you are, kind, compassionate, always ready to help others. Yet, somehow, painfully alone, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Think about the last time someone asked you for help. Remember how quickly you said yes, dropping everything to be there for them? Now think about the last time you asked someone for help. When was it? Can you even remember? This, my dear friends, is where our journey begins. You see, I've spent decades studying human behavior, watching patterns emerge like constellations in the night sky. And there's one pattern that breaks my heart every time I see it. The kinder and more giving a person is, the more likely they are to find themselves walking life's path alone. It's a painful paradox that defies everything we've been taught about goodness being rewarded. Let me share something with you. That happened back in 2014. I was sitting in a small cafe in Boston watching people come and go when I noticed a young woman named Sarah. Every morning, she would come in, buy 2 coffees and give one to the homeless man who sat outside. She would spend a few minutes chatting with him, her smile brightening his day. The baristas loved her. Other customers smiled at her kindness. Yet every single day she sat alone at that corner table, her eyes carrying a weight that seemed too heavy for her gentle spirit. One day I gathered the courage to speak with her. "Why do you sit alone?" I asked. Her answer changed my understanding of human nature forever. "Because," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "everyone knows they can count on me, but somehow that's different from wanting to be with me." This, my friends, is the heart of our discussion today. We're going to explore why the nicest among us often find themselves in the deepest valleys of loneliness. But more importantly, we're going to understand how to break this cycle without losing the beautiful essence of who you are. You see, being nice isn't the problem. The problem lies in how we've been conditioned to express our niceness. We've learned to be nice in ways that slowly erase our own existence. We become human doormats, letting others wipe their feet on our boundaries while we smile and say, "Please go ahead." Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you changed your plans because someone needed your help? How often have you stayed late at work to finish a colleague's project while they went home to their family? When was the last time you said no to someone without spending hours feeling guilty about it? I remember meeting a man named Robert in 2012. He was the kind of person everyone loved, always volunteering for extra work, remembering everyone's birthdays, being the shoulder to cry on. During lunch breaks, his colleagues would share their deepest problems with him, then return to their social circles while he ate alone at his desk, catching up on the work he couldn't complete because he was busy helping others. One day, Robert had a health scare. Nothing serious, but enough to keep him home for a week. Know how many of those colleagues he'd helped over the years came to check on him? None. Not a single one. When he returned to work, they all said the same thing. "Oh, we didn't want to bother you. You're always so busy helping everyone else." This is what happens when we let our niceness become our entire identity. We become so good at being there for others that we disappear from our own lives. We become the supporting character in everyone else's story, never the protagonist of our own. True kindness includes being kind to yourself. The most profound act of niceness you can offer the world is to show up as your full, authentic self, boundaries and all. Edmund share a truth that might shake is people don't connect with your niceness, they connect with your humanity. When you're always nice, always agreeable, always available, you become like a vending machine of emotional support. Useful, but not something people form deep bonds with. Real connection happens in the spaces between giving and receiving, in the vulnerable moments, when you show not just your strength in helping others, but it happens when you let others see that you too have bad days, that you too need support, that you too are beautifully, imperfectly human. I've worked with thousands of people over the years, and I've noticed something fascinating. The ones who transform their loneliness into lasting connections aren't the ones who learn to be less nice. They're the ones who learn to be nice in a way that honors their own existence. They're the ones who discovered that setting boundaries isn't mean. It's actually the kindest thing you can do for both yourself and others. You see, when you're boundlessly nice, you rob others of the chance to be nice to you. You deny them the opportunity to experience the joy of giving, the satisfaction of being needed, the warmth of making a difference in someone else's life in your endless effort to be there for everyone. You accidentally create a one-way sand where connection can't flow both ways. Think about the people you feel closest to in your life. Are they the ones who are always perfect, always available, always agreeable, or are they the ones who've let you see their struggles, who've trusted you enough to ask for help, who've shown you both their light and their shadows? You know what's fascinating about water? It always finds its level. You can't force it to stay higher or lower. It will always settle where it naturally belongs. Our relationships work the same way. When we're constantly giving, constantly raising ourselves to meet others' needs while neglecting our own, we create an imbalance that nature itself resists. I remember a beautiful soul I met in 2011. Let's call her Maria. She was a kindergarten teacher, the kind who would spend her own money buying supplies for students who couldn't afford them. She would stay late helping children with their reading, spend weekends creating personalized learning materials, and never ask for anything in return. The parents adored her. The kids loved her. Her colleagues praised her dedication. But one day, Maria broke down in my office. "I give and give and give," she sobbed. "But when I go home at night, there's no one there to ask how my day was. No one knows that I haven't slept properly in weeks because I'm worried about my mother's health. No one sees me beyond what I can do for them." Maria's story isn't unique. It's a pattern I've seen repeated countless times. The more you give without reciprocation, the more people come to see you as a resource rather than a person. It's not because they're cruel or intentionally taking advantage. It's because you've trained them to see you this way. Think about how you introduce yourself to new people. Do you lead with what you do for others? Your job title? Your responsibilities? Your role as a caregiver? When was the last time you told someone about your dreams, your fears, your secret hopes for the future? We nice people often hide behind our giving nature because we're afraid that who we are isn't enough, that we need to earn our place in others' lives. Through constant service, let me share something that happened in a small town in Minnesota back in 2013. There was a man named David who was known as the town's go-to person for everything. Car trouble. Call David. Need help moving? David's your guy looking for someone to organize the church fundraiser. David would do it. He was loved, respected, and completely. One day, David's car broke down on a rural day during a snowstorm. He sat there for 3 hours before calling anyone for help. When I asked him why he waited so long, his answer was heartbreaking. I didn't want to bother anyone. Everyone has their own problems. This from a man who had helped half the town move their furniture, fix their cars? This, my friends, is the invisible prison we build around ourselves with the bricks of endless giving in the mortar of self-denial. We become so good at being strong for others that we forget how to be human ourselves. We forget that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bridge that others cross to reach our hearts. When you're always the giver, always the strong one, always the reliable one, you become like a mountain admired from afar, but rarely visited. People look up to you, but they don't connect with you. They appreciate you, but they don't know you. They rely on you, but they don't love you in the way you desperately want to be loved. There's a profound difference between being nice and being authentic. Nice is a behavior. Authentic is a state of being. When we're merely nice, we're performing, constantly monitoring ourselves to ensure we're meeting others' expectations. But when we're authentic, we create space for real connection, even if that means sometimes being messy, sometimes being needy, sometimes being imperfect. I witnessed this transformation in a woman named Claire back in 2015. She was the quintessential nice girl, always remembering everyone's preferences, never complaining, constantly putting others first. During a group therapy session, someone asked her, "What makes you angry?" Claire looked confused. "I don't get angry," she said. "It's not nice." That moment was a revelation. Claire had suppressed her entire emotional spectrum in the pursuit of niceness. She had become so invested in being agreeable that she had lost touch with her own truth. And here's the irony. People found her hard to connect with because she wasn't real. Person niceness had become a wall rather than a bridge. When was the last time you felt truly seen? Not appreciated for what you do, but seen for who you are? When was the last time someone held space for your pain, your confusion, your less than perfect moments? If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. We nice people often create such a perfect exterior that others forget we have an interior life at all. This reminds me of a conversation I had with a successful businessman in 2010. He had everything: money, respect, influence, but he came to me because he was profoundly lonely. I built my life around being useful. I'm on every charity board. I mentor young entrepreneurs. I solve everyone's problems. But last week I turned 50 and no one remembered. No one knows it's my favorite number because it reminds me of my father. No one knows I collect vintage cameras or that I secretly write poetry. They know what I can do for them, but they don't know me. This is the tragedy of the nice person. We become so good at being useful that we forget to be real. We become so invested in being liked that we forget to be lovable. We become so focused on avoiding conflict that we forget to create connect. Real connection isn't built on niceness. It's built on authenticity, vulnerability, and the courage to be imperfectly human. Let me tell you about a moment that changed my understanding of human connection forever. It was a rainy afternoon in 2008, and I was watching two children play in a park. One child fell and scraped her knee. Her friend, instead of immediately helping her up, sat down beside her in the mud and said, "That looks like it really hurts." In that simple moment, I witnessed something profound. The difference between fixing and connecting. We nice people are fixers. We see pain and we rush to solve it. We hear problems and we jump to offer solutions. We sense discomfort and we immediately try to make it better. But in our rush to fix everything, we miss this sacred space where real connection happens, the space of shared humanity. Think about your own patterns for a moment. When someone shares their troubles with you, how quickly do you shift into solution mode? How often do you really sit with them in their pain, their confusion, their mess? We've become so addicted to being helpful that we've forgotten how to be present. I met a woman named Grace in 2014 who exemplified this pattern perfectly. She was a counselor, ironically enough, who spent her days helping others navigate their emotional landscapes. But in her personal life, she was profoundly, "I don't know how to just be with people," she confessed. The moment someone shares a problem, I go into counselor mode. I can't turn it off, and somehow that makes people pull away. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is not try to be kind. Sometimes the most connecting thing we can do is not try to fix. Sometimes the most human thing we can do is simply say, "I don't know what to say, but I'm here." Let me share something that might surprise you. People aren't looking for perfection in their relationships. They're looking for permission to be imperfect themselves. When you're always the strong one, always the capable one, always the one who has it all together, you unconsciously send a message that there's no room for weakness, no space for struggle, no acceptance of flaws. I remember a conversation with a man named Thomas in 2007. He was the neighborhood's beloved handyman, always ready to help, never asking for anything in return. One day his basement flooded, and he struggled alone for hours trying to fix it. When I asked him why, he didn't call any of the countless people he'd helped over the years. He said something that still haunts me. "I didn't want to disappoint them. They see me as the person who solves problems, not the person who has them." This is the trap we nice people set for ourselves, that we become so invested in our role as the helper that we forget to be human. We become so accustomed to giving that we forget how to receive. We become so practiced at being strong that we forget. Strength often comes in the ability to be weak. Every time you refuse to show your vulnerability, every time you hide your struggles, every time you pretend to be stronger than you are, you're not just protecting yourself. You're building a wall between you and authentic connection. You're sending a subtle but powerful message. "I don't trust you with my real self." There's a teacher I met in 2013 who transformed her entire life by understanding this principle. She had always been the one students came to with their problems, the one colleagues relied on for emotional support, the one friend everyone called in a crisis. But she was lonely, deeply lonely. One day she decided to do something radical when a colleague asked how she was. Instead of her usual "I'm fine," she said, "Actually, I'm struggling today. My mother's illness is weighing heavily on my mind instead of her usual. Don't worry about it." When someone apologized for being late, she said, "I appreciate your apology. It does affect my day when I have to wait." The initial response was shock. People didn't know how to handle this new version of her who had needs, feelings, and boundaries. Some even got angry. How dare she stop being their emotional vending machine? But gradually, something beautiful happened. The people who stayed in her life began to know her, really know her. They began to share their own truths. Real friendships formed, not based on what she could do for others, but on mutual understanding and genuine connection. This brings us to a fundamental truth about loneliness people in your life. It's about the quality of your connections with them. And quality connections can only happen when both people show up as their real selves, not their nice personas. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most deeply connected to someone. Was it when you were both pretending to be perfect, or was it when you shared your fears, your doubts, your struggles? Was it when you were fixing their problems, or when you were simply being present with them and their pain? I remember sitting with a group of what society would call nice people in 2009. Teachers, nurses, social workers, caregivers. As they shared their stories, a pattern emerged. They all knew how to take care of others, but they had never learned how to let others take care of them. They knew how to give love, but they had never learned how to receive it. They knew how to be strong for others, but they had never learned how to be vulnerable themselves. There's a story from 2006 that I've never forgotten. A young nurse named Rebecca worked in the oncology ward, giving everything she had to her patients, their families, and her colleagues. One day, she fainted during her shift. When she came to, the doctor asked when she'd last eaten. She couldn't remember. When he asked about her sleep pattern, she brushed it off. But then he asked something that changed her life. "Who takes care of the caretaker?" Rebecca burst into tears. For years, she'd been so focused on being there for others that she'd forgotten how to be there for herself. But here's what's truly remarkable about her story. When she finally started taking care of herself, when she began setting boundaries and acknowledging her own needs, she didn't become less caring. She became more authentic in her care. This brings us to a crucial understanding. It says ice people don't end up alone because they're nice. They end up alone because they've forgotten that being nice to others while being cruel to yourself is still cruelty. It's time to rewrite this story. It's time to understand that true kindness begins with being kind to yourself. Let me share something I witnessed in 2012. There was a support group for people struggling with chronic people-pleasing. One member, Michael, shared how he'd always say yes to every request, every favor, every demand on his time. His calendar was full of other people's priorities, while his own dreams gathered dust in the corners of his mind. One day, he did something revolutionary. He started keeping 2 lists. On one list, he wrote down everything he did for others. On the other, he wrote down everything he did for himself. The disparity was shocking. His for others list filled pages. His for myself list had 3 items: shower, eat, sleep, and even those were often sacrificed when others needed him. This exercise became a turning point in his life. He realized that his endless giving wasn't generosity. It was self-erasure. Here's a truth that might feel uncomfortable. Every time you say yes to someone else while saying no to yourself, you're teaching the world that your needs don't matter. Every time you push aside your own dreams to fulfill others' expectations, you're showing the universe that your purpose is to be a supporting character in everyone else's story. I remember meeting a woman in 2015 who had mastered the art of what she called kind boundaries. Lisa was a social worker who had once been the classic burnout case. Always available, always helping, always putting others first. But she discovered something powerful. The kindest thing you can do for others is to show them how to. She started small when people would ask for her time instead of her automatic. "Yes," she began saying. "Let me check my calendar and get back to you." This simple pause created space for her to consider her own needs. When colleagues would dump their emotional baggage on her during lunch breaks, she learned to say, "I care about what you're going through, and I also need some quiet time to recharge." The initial response was predictable. Some people got angry, some tried to guilt her, some pulled away. But, gradually, something beautiful happened. The people who stayed in her life began to respect her boundaries. More surprisingly, they began to share their own boundaries. The relationships that remained became deeper, more authentic, more reciprocal. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's sacred. It's not pushing people away. It's showing them how to get closer in a healthy way. When you honor your own boundaries, you teach others that you're worthy of respect. When you acknowledge your own needs, you give others permission to do the same. Think about the oxygen mask principle on airplanes. You must secure your own mask before helping others. This isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival. The same principle applies to emotional energy, time and care. You cannot sustainably give what you don't first give yourself. I witnessed a powerful demonstration of this in 2011. A teacher named James had always been everyone's favorite confidant. During lunch breaks, his classroom was filled with colleagues sharing their problems. After school, he'd stay late helping students with their personal issues. His phone was constantly buzzing with friends needing advice. He was everybody's rock, but he was drowning. One day he did something brave. He started therapy, not to become less caring, but to learn how to care for himself with the same dedication he showed others. In therapy, he discovered that his compulsive need to help others was rooted in a belief that his worth came from his usefulness. He learned that true connection isn't built on utility, it's built on authenticity. James began practicing what he called conscious caring. Before saying yes to any requests, he'd ask himself 3 questions. Do I have the emotional energy for this? Am I doing this out of genuine care or obligation? What am I saying no to in my own life by saying yes to this? These questions became his compass, guiding him toward more authentic relationships. Some people drifted away when he stopped being constantly available, but those who stayed developed a deeper appreciation for him as a person, not just a provider of support. Here's the paradigm shift we need to embrace. Being nice isn't about being available 24/7. It's not about saying yes to every request. It's not about silencing your own needs to meet others' demands. True niceness, the kind that creates lasting connections, is about being authentic, setting healthy boundaries, and showing up as your full self. I remember a conversation with a group of recovering people-pleasers in 2014. I used to think that setting boundaries meant building walls. Now I understand that boundaries are more like garden fences. They show where I end and others begin, allowing relationships to grow in healthy soil. Let me share something that happened just before I gave a talk in Phoenix in 2015. A woman approached me, tears streaming down her face. "I've spent my whole life being nice," she said. "And tonight I realize I don't even know who I am beneath all this niceness." Her words capture the journey. So many of us are on the journey from being nice to being real. You see, we're standing at a crossroads. On one path lies the familiar territory of endless giving, of saying yes when we mean no, of smiling when we want to cry, of being there for everyone except ourselves. It's a path that leads to admiration but not connection, to appreciation but not love, to being needed but not known. The other path, the one I'm inviting you to take, is harder. It's the path of authentic kindness. It's the path where you learn to say, "I care about you and I care about me." It's where you discover that being human is more connecting than being helpful, that being real is more attractive than being nice, that being present is more powerful than being perfect. I remember a mentor of mine sharing a story back in 2005 about two gardens. One gardener spent all their time tending to other people's gardens, making them beautiful while their own withered from neglect. The other gardener tended first to their own garden, making it lush and vibrant, filled with flowers that attracted butterflies and bees. Soon people would come to sit in this garden, sharing stories and finding peace. The first gardener created beauty for others, but lived in barrenness. The second gardener created beauty that became a gift to everyone. Which garden are you attending? You see, the greatest gift you can give the world isn't your endless availability. It isn't your constant agreeableness. It isn't your perpetual niceness. The greatest gift you can give is your authentic self, with all its messy emotions, inconvenient needs, and beautiful imperfections. Think about the people you love most deeply. Are they the ones who never need anything from you, or are they the ones who trust you enough to be vulnerable with you? Are they the ones who are always strong, or are they the ones who let you see their weakness, their struggles, their humanity? I worked with a man named Peter in 2013 who made a list of all the things he never told anyone because he was trying to be nice. He never told his friends when they hurt his feelings. He never told his family when their demands became too much. He never told his colleagues when their requests interrupted his important work. He never told anyone about his dreams because he didn't want to seem selfish. One day, Peter decided to experiment with truth-telling. Not cruel truth, but kind truth. When his friend canceled plans at the last minute for the third time, instead of saying, "No problem," he said, "I feel disappointed because I was looking forward to seeing you. And this makes me wonder if you value our time together." His friend was initially taken aback, but then something amazing happened. They had their first real conversation about their friendship. The real connection happens not in the spaces of our perfection, but in the places of our humanity. It happens not when we're being unfailingly nice, but when we're being unapologetically authentic. I remember sitting with a group of healthcare workers in 2008. They were experts at caring for others, but when I asked them to write down what they needed, they stared at their blank papers for minutes. They had become so disconnected from their own needs that they couldn't even identify them. This is the cost of chronic niceness. We lose touch with our own hearts. But here's the beautiful truth. It's never too late to come home to yourself. It's never too late to learn that being nice and being authentic aren't mutually exclusive. It's never too late to discover that the deepest connections happen when we show up as ourselves, not as who we think others want us to be. Start your journey back to yourself. Start small if you need to the next time someone asks how you are. Pause for a moment and give an honest answer. The next time you want to automatically say yes, take a breath and check in with yourself first. The next time you feel the urge to fix someone's problems, try sitting with them in their pain instead. Remember the woman I told you about at the beginning, Sarah, who bought coffee for the homeless man every morning but sat alone? I met her again 2 years later. She had transformed, not by becoming less kind, but by becoming more real. She still bought coffee for the homeless man, but she also joined a writing group where she shared her poetry. She still helped others, but she also asked for help when she needed it. She still gave, but she also learned to receive. People weren't just grateful to her anymore. They were drawn to her. They weren't just appreciative of her. They were connected to her because she wasn't just nice anymore. She was real. This is your moment, right here, right now. You can continue on the path of surface-level niceness that leads to admiration but loneliness. Or you can step onto the path of authentic kindness that leads to real, deep, lasting connections. Your niceness isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. It's time to complete it with truth, with boundaries, with self-respect, with authenticity. It's time to discover that being human is more connecting than being helpful. That being real is more attractive than being nice. That being yourself is the greatest gift you can give to the world. The world doesn't need more nice people who are alone. The world needs whole people who are real. People who can say yes authentically and no respectfully. People who can give from their overflow, not their emptiness. People who understand that true connection happens not in the spaces of our perfection, but in the places of our shared humanity. Your journey to authentic connection begins now, not when you're perfect, not when you've figured everything out. Now, in this moment, with one small act of truth, with one moment of genuine self-expression, with one step toward being real, instead of just being nice. The path home to yourself is waiting. And I promise you, it leads not to loneliness, but to the deep, authentic connections your heart has always longed for. The choice is yours. The time is now. Welcome home to yourself.